Well, the time is just gone 9 minutes to 9 as we continue, and it's a weekly edition of Crime Talk with eThekwini Secure, the chairperson of eThekwini Secure, Imtiaz Syed, standing by. Imtiaz, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Inayat.
Yes, Imtiaz, sorry about that. Where do we start? Coalitions. Is it a
Mm.
coalition or is it an unholy alliance?
I would lean towards the latter, and that's ultimately where it comes down to. And when you're speaking about coalitions, we need to understand what is the pretext of having these coalitions, and is it just about power for a majority who then takes up the minority, gives them some position, and says, "Okay, we're in a partnership." Is it really a partnership, or are you just now someone that has to toe the line of the person or the party that has now put you into power? And that's where we see things failing. But something that we really need to consider, and we've been saying this when we originally joined the race for local government in 2021, was to say that we need to have a clear understanding of how the system of politics works in the country, and based on that, you'd be very clear to understand that you, as a citizen, gets service delivery at its true form in local government. Now, when we have major parties like the ANC, the DA, the IFP, the EFF, all of them that run national parties and provincial parties, and they sit in all of these different groupings, and they have an interest in the entire country, then the ramifications of that is ultimately whatever it is that they decide nationally plays out in local government, which doesn't really speak to service delivery. So, if, for example, if the IFP and the EFF had some sort of arrangement in the province, like you've seen in January, where they had a fallout and all the deputy mayors that come from the EFF now resign, then ultimately the ramifications of that is that the EFF and the IFP can no longer work together in eThekwini. And that causes great, great instability in terms of how we move forward and in terms of how things are done. Now, some might say that we speak to this out of no understanding. Let's be very clear. We are a party within eThekwini, and we've been au fait for the past year of the goings on in the political climate and the political space. The sort of infighting that's happening is no longer within a party, but it's across all barriers. And the smaller parties that are there are trying to jostle between and try and be kingmakers. Now, if you have 24 parties and in eThekwini, and out of all of them, six are major national parties, the rest of us are all sitting here in local government, right? How is it that we can really believe that we are kingmakers without clearly having a part of how do we now bring change to the citizenry? And if it's in self-interest, then we're doing something wrong. And that's where this is going ultimately. Coalitions have not stabilized. They will not stabilize anytime soon. And the next 5 years is going to be a very, very rough road.
Well, if just, I think my reading into this is who controls the purse strings. And I think if I'm going to cite Gauteng as an
Mm.
example, it is clear that there is some sort of an agreement that has been reached between the likes of the ANC and the EFF, who
Correct.
are, apart from the DA, are the bigger parties. But
Hmm.
looking at this arrangement that has been made, Joburg is a classic case. We've got the ANC now in the finance portfolio, controlling the purse strings. We'd like to see what is going to play out in Shwane. Ekurhuleni is another region. And the reason why I'm saying the purse strings is if we look at the city of Joburg, the DA had applied for a loan or they wanted a loan to be passed to run the city. This was turned down by the likes of the ANC, the EFF, even supported by the Al Jama party. And now that we have this unholy alliance, for want of a better term, the very same loan is now being promoted. So again, it's about who is going to controlling the money in the city.
100%. And that's what it comes down to. We've seen it when we moved the motion against the mayor in eThekwini, that it was quite clear that the EFF has something to do with the ANC. And obviously, there was a move to cancel or basically collapse three different meetings to table the very same motion. But it was based on what was going to happen in Johannesburg, and the outcomes of that dictated the outcomes of eThekwini. I mean, ultimately, it is quite clear. In eThekwini, it was the EFF that saved the mayor currently. And that's what it is. Now, if we start allowing these types of politics to play out in the interest of political gain or political control over the purse strings, then in fact, what are we doing and what are we saying? Why is it and how is it that when the DA moves a motion around an issue of a loan, and you've seen it and you just mentioned it and cited it in Ikuruleni, is that why is it that we cannot put all of that aside and say what is in the best interest of the country, what is in the best interest of the municipality? And this is where it is. This is where what it comes down to. There is no such thing as, you know what, let's have, I mean, the whips of council, they currently sit there, right? And ultimately, whichever whip that comes in, they push their party agenda hard and strong. When in fact, that particular portfolio and that particular role is supposed to be bringing together everybody that sits in council. Let us firstly find our common ground. Let's leave out all the contentious issues about what we don't get along with and what we support and what we don't support. But what is it that we should be supporting in local government? And that should ultimately be, as a priority, service delivery. Now, if we can't come together and we want to politic every single thing, we ultimately end up with failing municipalities, a lack of service delivery, and the people are going to see it. But the point I'm making here, Inayat, is that local government should now restructure itself. And bigger parties, yes, they have a right to run in local government, but they should not put in their hands into local government. Let local government decide what it is they're doing. I mean, you've seen, and I don't know whether you've seen it a few weeks ago, where there's some disgruntlement within the EFF in KZN, where they're saying that they always got to listen to the national party or the national leadership in terms of what it is they do in local government. And that ultimately affects them, because now it makes them look very unstable, because today it's the EFF calling for X and tomorrow they'll be moving against X. So what is it? What is your principle? What are you standing for? What is your part for the next 5 years? And what do you plan to bring to the city or any municipality that we're in to say that how this is the direction we want? And this is what it is. This is really what it comes down to. Politics takes precedence over anything else when it comes to local municipalities. And this is something we need to get right.
Well, Imtiaz, the question is this a sign of things to come? And we are going to experience this at a national level. And let us not be surprised that we could even have a coalition at a national level and a Julius Malema, for example, as the deputy president of the country.
Absolutely. And the trajectory of it, and why is there such a big rush? Remember, we're coming in from local government. And remember, where is it that the money really sits? The money really sits in local government through ratepayers and all of these things that happen within local government. Whoever controls those purse strings has the biggest campaign for 2024. And that's the reality of the climate. Ultimately, this is just a corrupt system that is incessantly corrupt, has been corrupt, and it's going to continue doing that. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's just the ANC. I'm saying that it's every single party, whether it's the DA, the IFP, the ANC, all of them are doing exactly the same thing in municipalities they run. They want to run their campaign for 2024 and they want to take power. They want to control those purse strings, especially, I mean, right now we're seeing the Human Settlements and Infrastructure Committee is now being divided up. And they're taking, in fact, water, sanitation, and CSW services, which is part of Human Settlements and Infrastructure, and they're moving it to economic development. Where do we get that and why do we get that? It's very simple. It's because of the agreement that they had that the EFF would now be chairing the Human Settlements and Infrastructure Committee, and therefore they're moving those main things that control majority of the city's budget to economic development, who is basically chaired by the ANC. So this is what it is, and we see it every day playing out. It doesn't really, I mean, we sit in council meetings, and if you're sitting where we sit, you clearly realize that what we see in the council agenda is not, in fact, the reasoning of why it's, in fact, on the agenda. The reason it's on the agenda is to push another agenda which is unseen to the public. And this is really, really problematic for us because there's really nothing substantive that speaks to how do we move forward and what is in the best interest of the people. So the voter really needs to be aware of this, and we will be in the next few months be giving you this sort of information because we now have a right to do so. We sit in council and we have a right to tell you exactly what's going on, and that's where it is, if you know what I mean.
Well, certainly, and also I think the whole voting thinking needs to actually change. And as you mentioned, voters need to be aware of all these issues, and it's no longer, about sentiment. It is no longer that
Correct.
affiliation to a party. There are real issues, and these issues need to come out in the fore in the build up to
Mm.
the elections. So, with it, Imtiaz, I'm sure you and I will have a lot more to talk about on
Inshallah.
the subject over the next few months inshallah. But for now, Jazakallah, as always. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Imtiaz Syed, Chairperson of eThekwini, secure with us this morning. We're heading for the news. We've got Zaid Jedwood standing by.